There are parts of the country where survival depends on trusting systems you'll never meet. Maps, radios, weather forecasts. And there are parts where those same systems quietly accept losses and keep moving. Ask yourself which kind of place you're in the next time someone doesn't come home. Ask whether the rules around you were written to protect you, or to make sure whatever took them stays contained. My name is Lucas H. Calder. I am a deputy sheriff with the Granite County Sheriff's Office in western Montana. I've served in this county for 14 years, 9 of those as a field deputy assigned to rural response and wilderness coordination. This is not an official statement. It can't be. Official statements require conclusions. They require causes that can be named, categorized, and entered into a database that syncs with Helena or DC. What I'm giving you is a survival account. The kind we pass verbally, usually late, usually after something has already gone wrong. Granite County sits where the Pintler Range starts to fold into itself. Steep timbered slopes. Old mines that never got capped right. River bottoms that flood and refreeze and shift every year. There are places in my jurisdiction where the GPS will tell you you're standing in 3 locations at once, and places where sound behaves wrong, echoes arrive early, or not at all. We patrol it anyway. Our job isn't to stop danger. That's the lie people believe. Our job is to keep certain dangers predictable. I work in places where rules exist not to prevent accidents, but to contain something that preys on human behavior. Those rules are not written down. They're learned. Usually the hard way. Within my first year on the job, I was briefed, not officially, by my supervising deputy, a man named Earl Whitcomb who'd been in the county since the late 90s. We were parked near the Phillipsburg trestle, engine off, watching fog fill the valley like a spill you couldn't clean up. He told me 3 things that night. First, if a call comes in about someone walking out of the woods without shoes in winter, you do not let them ride in the front seat. Second, if search and rescue asks whether they should keep calling a lost person's phone after sunset, you tell them no, even if it's ringing. Third, if remains are recovered above 6,500 feet that don't match any known missing person, you log the recovery but you do not speculate, and you do not ask where the rest of them went. I asked why. Earl said, because asking is how you get noticed. I thought he meant bureaucratically that I didn't understand yet that attention works both ways. The first confirmed death I responded to that fell under these rules happened in 2013. Her name was Marlene Ives. 32 years old. Seasonal forestry technician. Last seen near Skalkaho Pass in late October, after an early storm closed the road. Her truck was found pulled cleanly to the shoulder, keys still in the ignition, hazard lights off. Rule breaking wasn't the reason she died. Compassion was. She had stopped for something. We found her parka folded on a rock like someone had taken it off carefully. Her boots were set side by side. No signs of struggle. No tracks leading away that made sense. When we recovered what we could, and I'm careful with that phrasing, the remains did not match human records. Not dental. Not bone density. Not tissue structure under histology. The report lists exposure complicated by scavenging. That phrase gets used a lot. By the time you've been here long enough, you learn the unofficial rules. We don't number them formally, but everyone counts them the same way. Rule 1. Do not follow footprints that end abruptly, especially above tree line. Rule 2. Do not call out names after dark unless you can see who you're calling to. Rule 3. If you encounter someone who appears lost but cannot tell you how they arrived where you found them, you do not let them touch you. Rule 4. Never conduct a solo recovery above 6,500 feet, even if command clearance says otherwise. Rule 5, and this one is the most dangerous, if you see something that looks like a person you know where they should not be, assume you are wrong. That last rule is incomplete. We didn't know it was incomplete at first. We thought it was the safest one. In February of 2016, Deputy Aaron Klein broke Rule 4 because of duty. He was my partner. Closest thing I had to family on the job. His sister's kid lived in Phillipsburg. He believed in doing the right thing even when it cost him sleep. A snowmobiler had failed to return from an off-trail route near Mount Hagen. Weather was closing in. Command wanted to stand down until morning. Aaron went anyway. He didn't want the kid's mother waiting overnight if there was still a chance. His body was never recovered. What we found instead was his radio, transmitting intermittently from 3 different elevations at once. The official line says avalanche burial. What I can tell you is that avalanches don't erase people cleanly. The entity, and that's the closest word I have, does not hunt like an animal. It doesn't stalk. It doesn't chase. It creates absence. Gaps where people should be. It removes continuity. You don't see it take someone. You notice later that the world has edited them out improperly. Its primary interaction is erasure. People disappear mid-action, mid-decision, mid-compassion. It doesn't always work alone. Sometimes the environment helps. Snow fills tracks too fast, wind covers sound, but those are secondary effects. The real damage is psychological. You start doubting your own memory. You wonder whether the person was ever there at all. That's how it feeds on human rules, on our need for witnesses, for confirmation, for shared reality. And here's the limitation that matters, the one that keeps us alive longer than we deserve. It needs witnesses. Not crowds. Not documentation. Witnesses who see absence happen. If no one sees the gap form, it can't stabilize it. The loss bleeds back into the world as noise, radio interference, GPS errors, remains that don't match records. That's why we sometimes find things. Pieces. That's why containment is possible, but never permanent. In late summer of 2019, my wife, Erin, started volunteering with County SAR Logistics. She handled call trees and supply coordination. She knew the rules as they applied to civilians. She did not know the ones we kept from family. Our son, Noah, was 8 that year. This is where Rule 5 failed us. On August 14, 2019, a hiker named Thomas Reeve went missing near the Flint Creek Range. 39. Out of state. Last ping from his phone was near an abandoned fire lookout trail that hadn't been maintained in decades. He had a dog with him. Search was initiated by protocol. We followed the rules. On day 2, Erin received a call at home. The caller ID showed my number. She answered. The voice didn't speak. She said my name anyway. That counted as a violation. By the time I got home, Noah was standing in the driveway barefoot, staring up the road like he was waiting for someone he could already see. I didn't ask who. That night, I broke Rule 2. I called out after dark. I believed, for a moment, that the thing exploiting us might actually be a person we loved. That belief costs you permanently. I am not telling you this to scare you, I am telling you this because the system is tired. Containment relies on people choosing rules over instincts, over compassion, over duty, and sooner or later, someone always chooses wrong for the right reasons. By the end of this account, you will understand why we don't list causes, why some recovered remains don't get names, why certain elevations have fewer patrols than maps would suggest, and why, if you ever find yourself in rural Montana, and someone you love appears where they should not be, you must not go to them. Even knowing that, some of us still do. I didn't sleep the night Noah stood in the driveway. That's not unusual in this line of work. What was unusual was how quiet everything felt afterward. Not the good quiet. Not the kind you get after a storm passes and the snow absorbs sound. This was a hollow quiet. Like the world had decided to stop checking its own work. Erin sat at the kitchen table until dawn. She kept her phone face down. She didn't ask me what I'd seen, and I didn't ask her what she'd heard. That was another rule, unspoken but understood. You don't trade details unless containment requires it. Memory sharing strengthens patterns. The fewer synchronized accounts, the less stable the absence becomes. Noah went back to bed on his own. He didn't remember walking outside. He didn't remember taking his shoes off. When he woke up, he asked why his feet hurt. I told him it was from the cold. That was my first violation rooted entirely in love. The next morning, I filed a report about Thomas Reeves' disappearance. I kept it procedural. Coordinates. Weather. Known timeline. I did not mention the phone call to my house. I did not mention Noah. The system doesn't want that information, and honestly, neither does the thing exploiting it. By midweek, we had our second failure. Deputy Marissa Holt broke Rule 1. Marissa was newer than me, but not green. Former EMT. Smart. Methodical. She'd grown up hiking these ranges. When SAR flagged a set of partial footprints above treeline, not leading anywhere, just stopping, she volunteered to follow them upslope to confirm termination. She did it by the book. Flag tape. Radio check every 10 minutes. Visual confirmation only. What she didn't account for was that the tracks didn't end. They edited themselves out gradually, each step less defined than the last, until there was nothing left to follow except expectation. That's how it gets you. I was monitoring her channel when her breathing changed. No panic. Just confusion. "Lucas," she said, "these don't make sense." I told her to stop. I told her to turn around. She hesitated. That hesitation mattered. "I think there's something wrong with my depth perception," she said. "The ground feels." Static cut her off. When we reached her last confirmed position, there was no sign of a struggle. No sign of movement at all. Just her pack set down carefully beside a boulder, radio clipped neatly to the strap. The ground around her was pristine. She was never recovered. That was the third disappearance in 6 years tied to the same elevation band. The pattern was becoming hard to ignore, even for command. A meeting was called. Closed door. Sheriff, undersheriff, 2 senior deputies, and a representative from the state who introduced himself only by first name. He listened more than he spoke. Took notes he never referred back to. We didn't use the word entity. We never do in those rooms. We talked about anomalous losses. Terrain-specific risk. Human factors. I laid out the rules as I understood them. The real ones. Not the laminated safety procedures. When I got to Rule 5, the room went quiet. "If you see someone you know where they shouldn't be," I said, "assume you're wrong." The state rep asked, "What if you're not?" I didn't answer him. The sheriff did. "Then you lose someone twice." That was the closest we came to acknowledgement. After the meeting, the sheriff pulled me aside. He looked older than he had a month earlier. "This job does that. Not all at once. Just enough each time. You need to take leave," he said. I told him no. He didn't argue. He just nodded like he'd expected that answer. The next incident forced our hand. In October of 2020, we recovered remains near an old logging road above Maxville. Partial skeletal structure. Tissue degraded in a way I'd never seen. The bones didn't match any missing persons records. Not locally. Not nationally. The remains were positioned deliberately. Not scattered. Arranged. That was new. We brought in a forensic anthropologist from Missoula. She worked quietly. Asked careful questions. She didn't laugh when we told her the elevation. After 12 hours, she asked to speak to me alone. "These aren't human," she said. I told her I knew. She hesitated. That hesitation again. "They are close," she said. "But the growth patterns are wrong. The density shifts abruptly. Like something learned what bones are supposed to look like, but didn't have enough reference." I asked her what she planned to write in her report. She looked tired. "Exposure with post-mortem alteration," she said. "Same as the others." She left the county 2 days later and declined future consultation requests. That winter was the hardest one yet. Snow came early and stayed late. Roads closed. Radios failed more often than not. Erin stopped volunteering with SAR. She didn't say why, but I knew. Logistics puts you too close to voices. To call logs. To unanswered rings. Noah started sleepwalking. He'd stand at the top of the stairs, eyes open, breathing steady, listening. We installed alarms. We locked doors. We followed every domestic rule we could think of. It didn't matter. One night, he spoke. Not loudly. Not clearly. Just a name. Dad, he said. Not my name. Not Daddy. The formal address he'd only ever used in public. I stayed in bed. That was the rule I made for myself. If he left his room, I would not follow him unless I could see him fully illuminated. Unless I could confirm continuity. Erin didn't know that rule. I hadn't told her. She got up to be by the time I reached the hallway, she was already at the top of the stairs. Noah was halfway down, barefoot again, hand outstretched toward the front door. There was someone standing on the porch. I could see the silhouette through the frosted glass. It looked like Aaron. My partner. Gone 4 years. This is where Rule 5 becomes lethal. Erin took another step. I grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. She cried out. Noah turned. For a second, his eyes focused. The silhouette didn't move. It didn't knock. It didn't speak. It waited. That was the limitation in action. It needed witnesses. If Erin opened the door and confirmed absence by presence, if she saw Aaron clearly enough to register the impossibility, the gap would stabilize. We would lose more than one person. I pulled them both back. I didn't look at the door again until morning. The porch was empty. A school bus broke down on a rural route near the edge of my old patrol area. Mechanical failure. Driver and 7 kids. No cell service. Radio barely functioning. The driver did everything right. Kept the kids together. Stayed with the vehicle. Called in when she could. Response was delayed. Staffing. Distance. By the time deputies arrived, the bus was empty. No sign of struggle. No tracks leading away. Just backpacks still under seats and the smell of cold metal. 7 child witnesses vanished simultaneously. That kind of absence shouldn't have held. The rollback was immediate and catastrophic. Within an hour, emergency calls flooded in across the county. Reports of children appearing in yards that weren't theirs. Screaming. Disoriented. Some returned home. Some didn't. 3 of the 7 were never found. 2 came back wrong. One of them bit a deputy hard enough to draw blood when he tried to help her. She didn't recognize her own parents. She kept asking where the quiet place had gone. The last child, a boy named Evan Pike, was found standing on a ridgeline above town at dawn. Alone. Watching the valley. He told us he'd been helping it count. That phrase went nowhere officially. Psych evaluation. Trauma response. Media blackout. But among those of us who knew, it landed like a verdict. The thing was escalating not in volume, but in complexity. It was no longer just erasing people. It was delegating. That forced a shift we'd been avoiding. Containment could no longer rely on avoidance alone. We needed active interference. The state team reconvened. This time, they didn't pretend I wasn't necessary. They asked me to help plan a saturation event. Larger than the test near Drummond. Riskier. Focused not on rollback, but disruption. If it needs witnesses, one of them said, what happens when it has too many? The answer wasn't theoretical. We chose a site near an abandoned ski area. High elevation. Clear lines of sight. Controlled access points. 46 volunteers. All trained. All briefed. All told the same thing. If you see someone you know where they shouldn't be, you do not acknowledge them. You look at the space around them. You witness the absence, not the shape. The thing responded immediately. People reported pressure changes. Vertigo. Auditory distortion. the sense of being watched without direction. Then someone screamed. A woman in the outer ring had seen her brother, dead 10 years, standing at the tree line. She broke. She ran toward him. That single act destabilized the entire formation. The absence collapsed inward. The air tore. Several people went down hard. We lost 4 volunteers that day. Not erased. Damaged. One never spoke again. Another couldn't recognize faces. Just blank ovals where people should be. Containment failed. The thing didn't retreat. It learned. After that, the rules stopped being enough. We were dealing with something that could adapt faster than institutional memory could keep up. And institutions don't like admitting when they've lost control. They scaled back. Quietly. Reframed objectives. Public safety over anomaly management. Liability over containment. In other words, they chose to let it spread. That's when I realized this was no longer about my county, or my job, or even my family. This was about the limits of systems built on human compassion and duty, trying to restrain something that understands both better than we do. I started writing this account not because I thought it would help, but because records matter. Witnesses matter. And because sooner or later, someone reading this will find themselves standing somewhere they shouldn't be, feeling watched by an absence that knows their name. When that happens, I want the rules to be there. Even if they fail. After the saturation failure, the language changed. Not officially. Not in memos. But in the way people spoke when they thought no one else was listening. Words like containment and mitigation gave way to damage control and acceptable loss. When systems can't solve a problem, they redefine success. I was brought back into the field under consultative status. No uniform. No marked vehicle. I rode along when something went wrong enough that procedure alone couldn't handle it. I was there to recognize patterns and tell people when to stop asking questions. That became my real job. The rules were still passed verbally, but they were fraying. Everyone remembered different versions. Some added precautions that helped. Others repeated older rules that no longer applied. That's how incomplete rules become lethal. Rule 6 emerged during this period, though no one numbered it at the time. If someone returns, do not ask them what they saw. That rule saved lives. It also ruined families. Returned individuals were isolated quickly. Medical holds. Psychological evaluation. Sometimes protective custody disguised as care. Loved ones were kept at arm's length, told it was for recovery. In reality, it was to limit witnesses. People noticed. Trust eroded. The thing exploited that erosion. In March of 2024, a volunteer firefighter named Ben Harlow disappeared during a routine check of a remote pump station. His wife, Claire, refused to wait for official response timelines. She went looking herself with 2 friends. They found Ben. He was standing in the creek below the station, water running around his boots, staring straight ahead. He didn't respond when they called his name. He didn't blink. Claire waded in without hesitation. That was violation number 1. Compassion. When she touched him, his skin felt cold but pliable, like something left out overnight that hadn't frozen solid. He turned his head slowly toward her. He smiled. That smile cost us 3 people. Only Claire came back. She was found 2 miles downstream at dawn, hypothermic and incoherent. She kept apologizing for letting him finish. Finish what? She never clarified. Ben and the 2 friends were never recovered. The creek ran clean. That incident forced another shift. We started mapping emotional relationships alongside geography. Family clusters. Social ties. Who would go looking if someone didn't come back? The thing didn't just remove individuals. It targeted lines of response. Containment meant discouraging love. That realization broke what little certainty I had left. I stopped pretending I was still the same person who'd taken the oath 14 years earlier. The badge had been about service. Now it felt like a liability, a marker that made me predictable. I started seeing Aaron less, talking to Noah only by phone. Distance became another rule. In May, Noah turned 13. I mailed him a card instead of visiting. That was my third violation rooted in love, choosing absence to avoid a worse one. The thing noticed. On the night of his birthday, I was called out to an abandoned rest area along Highway 1. Reports of a child standing alone near the tree line, matching Noah's description closely enough that dispatch flagged it for me personally. I knew better. The rules grew heavier with each retelling, like a burden passed hand to hand. I found myself hesitating more often, double-checking shadows, listening too hard. That's how it gets you eventually. In December of 2022, Aaron left. Not dramatically. No shouting. She took Noah and went to her sisters in Missoula for a while. She said he needed normalcy. School, friends, sidewalks. She asked me to come with them. I said I couldn't. That was my second violation rooted entirely in duty. The house felt wrong after that. Too many witnesses gone. Too much empty space. That's when the thing started getting closer again. Small signs at first. Doors left unlocked that I knew I'd secured. Footprints near the tree line behind the house that stopped short of the yard. Radio chatter bleeding through my personal scanner late at night, repeating my name once and then cutting out. It never crossed the property line. Elevation matters. Our house sits just under 6,500 feet. That boundary is not arbitrary. In February of 2023, Noah came home for a weekend visit. He'd grown taller, quieter. He didn't like sleeping alone anymore. Aaron slept on the couch. I stayed up, listening. Around 2:13 a.m., the power flickered. That happens out here. Wind. Ice. But when the lights came back, Noah was standing in the hallway again, fully awake. "Dad," he said. "Mom's outside." Aaron was asleep on the couch behind me. This was the rule-breaking moment that ended my marriage. I moved toward him. I didn't touch him. That part of the rule I remembered. I knelt so we were eye level. I asked him what he could see. "She's by the trees," he said. "She's crying." I believed him. I believed, just for a second, that the thing might be using us to give something back. That belief is poison. I told him to go back to bed. He didn't argue. He turned, walked away. In the morning, Aaron found frost on the inside of the front door. She didn't ask me about it. She packed up early. That was the last time Noah stayed overnight. The system didn't punish me immediately. It never does. Consequences lag. They stretch out. But the damage was done. I had chosen wrong for the right reasons too many times. By spring, I was reassigned off-field duty. Administrative review. Mental health evaluation. Too many reports flagged as overly speculative. They were right. Speculation assumes uncertainty. I wasn't uncertain anymore. The thing is patient. It waits for erosion. And once you start seeing absence everywhere, it doesn't need to take you outright. It just has to let you keep living, knowing exactly how fragile the rules really are. Being pulled off field duty didn't feel like relief. It felt like exile. They moved me into a windowless office in the basement of the courthouse. Records review. Interagency coordination. The kind of work that keeps you adjacent to danger without letting you touch it. My badge still opened the same doors, but my radio was reassigned. That mattered more than anyone admitted. You can't contain something you're not allowed to hear. From my desk, I started seeing the pattern the way the public never could. Calls rerouted. Incident codes quietly changed. Disappearances logged as voluntary missing adults when timelines didn't support it. Juvenile cases split between agencies so no single office carried the full weight. Systemic failure doesn't announce itself, IT optimizes. The rules didn't change. Enforcement did. Deputies stopped correcting hikers who camped above elevation thresholds. Rangers waved off trail incursions they would have cited 5 years earlier. Everyone was tired. Everyone was understaffed. And the thing understood fatigue better than fear. It started using indirect consequence chains more aggressively. In July of 2023, a wildfire ignited near an unmaintained trail system west of Hall. Lightning strike. Nothing unusual. Except the fire line curved around a specific basin it should have consumed easily. Left it untouched. Like a void the flames refused to enter. Fire crews noticed. Talked about it on open channels. That was a mistake. 2 days later, a hotshot crew reported one of their own missing after a routine perimeter check. They searched fast. Organized. Professional. They found his helmet hanging from a tree branch 10 feet off the ground. No ladder marks. No broken limbs. Just absence arranged carefully enough to provoke questions. That was when the Forest Service patch from the state team showed up again. He asked me something no one else ever had. Do you think it's learning to punish curiosity directly? I told him yes. That night, I dreamed of Aaron again. Not his face. Just his outline. Standing somewhere I couldn't reach. The dream didn't scare me. It exhausted me. Like having to hold a door shut while something leaned against it, waiting for me to get tired. When I woke up, my phone showed 3 missed calls from Erin. She didn't leave messages. I drove to Missoula without calling back. That was a rule violation I never wrote down, but should have. Erin's sister's house was quiet. Too quiet for a place with a teenager in it. Erin looked thinner. Noah didn't come out to greet me. He doesn't want to see you, Erin said. I deserved that. She told me Noah had been having episodes at school. Zoning out. Standing still in hallways until teachers physically redirected him. Drawing maps that didn't match the campus layout. Labeling blank spaces instead of rooms. He says the empty parts are where it's easiest to breathe, she said. I felt something inside me settle into place. Not fear. Recognition. The thing hadn't taken him. It had marked him. Children are dangerous witnesses. Their perception isn't disciplined yet. They don't instinctively resolve contradictions the way adults do. They notice absence without needing to name it. That makes them valuable. That makes them targets. I told Erin everything then. Not all the details. Not the worst ones. But enough. She cried quietly. Not because she didn't believe me. Because she did. I can't let him come back there, she said. I nodded. I didn't argue. That was the closest thing to mercy I had left. When I returned to Granite County, my access was reduced further. I was still useful, but no longer trusted. That's how institutions protect themselves, by sidelining people who know too much without discrediting them outright. I started getting unofficial visits. Former deputies. SAR volunteers. One EMT who'd left the state entirely. They didn't come for answers. They came to confirm they weren't alone. Everyone had a story. A moment where a rule failed. A choice that felt right until it wasn't. One man, a retired game warden named Paul Reddick, told me something I'd never heard before. In the 70s, he said, we thought it couldn't cross running water. He laughed without humor. Lost 3 guys proving that wrong. Rules evolve through death. That's the only research budget we ever had. In October, the thing pushed harder than it had in years. A school bus broke down on a rural route near the edge of my old patrol area. Mechanical failure. Driver and 7 kids. No cell service. Radio barely functioning. The driver did everything right. Kept the kids together. Stayed with the vehicle. Called in when she could. Response was delayed. Staffing. Distance. By the time deputies arrived, the bus was empty. No sign of struggle. No tracks leading away. Just backpacks still under seats and the smell of cold metal. 7 child witnesses vanished simultaneously. That kind of absence shouldn't have held. The rollback was immediate and catastrophic. Within an hour, emergency calls flooded in across the county. Reports of children appearing in yards that weren't theirs. Screaming. Disoriented. Some returned home. Some didn't. 3 of the 7 were never found. 2 came back wrong. One of them bit a deputy hard enough to draw blood when he tried to help her. She didn't recognize her own parents. She kept asking where the quiet place had gone. The last child, a boy named Evan Pike, was found standing on a ridgeline above town at dawn. Alone. Watching the valley. He told us he'd been helping it count. That phrase went nowhere officially. Psych evaluation. Trauma response. Media blackout. But among those of us who knew, it landed like a verdict. The thing was escalating not in volume, but in complexity. It was no longer just erasing people. It was delegating. That forced a shift we'd been avoiding. Containment could no longer rely on avoidance alone. We needed active interference. The state team reconvened. This time, they didn't pretend I wasn't necessary. They asked me to help plan a saturation event, larger than the test near Drummond. Riskier. Focused not on rollback, but disruption. If it needs witnesses, one of them said, what happens when it has too many? The answer wasn't theoretical. We chose a site near an abandoned ski area. High elevation. Clear lines of sight. Controlled access points. 46 volunteers. All trained. All briefed. All told the same thing. If you see someone you know where they shouldn't be, you do not acknowledge them. You look at the space around them. You witness the absence, not the shape. The thing responded immediately. People reported pressure changes, vertigo, auditory distortion, the sense of being watched without direction. Then someone screamed. A woman in the outer ring had seen her brother, dead 10 years, standing at the tree-line. She broke. She ran toward him. That single act destabilized the entire formation. The absence collapsed inward. The air tore. Several people went down hard. We lost 4 volunteers that day. Not erased. Damaged. One never spoke again. Another couldn't recognize faces. Just blank ovals where people should be. Containment failed. The thing didn't retreat. It learned. After that, the rules stopped being enough. We were dealing with something that could adapt faster than institutional memory could keep up. And institutions don't like admitting when they've lost control. They scaled back. Quietly. Reframed objectives. Public safety over anomaly management. Liability over containment. In other words, they chose to let it spread. That's when I realized this was no longer about my county, or my job, or even my family. This was about the limits of systems built on human compassion and duty, trying to restrain something that understands both better than we do. I started writing this account not because I thought it would help, but because records matter. Witnesses matter. And because sooner or later, someone reading this will find themselves standing somewhere they shouldn't be, feeling watched by an absence that knows their name. When that happens, I want the rules to be there. Even if they fail. After the saturation failure, the language changed. Not officially. Not in memos. But in the way people spoke when they thought no one else was listening. Words like containment and mitigation gave way to damage control and acceptable loss. When systems can't solve a problem, they redefine success. I was brought back into the field under consultative status. No uniform. No marked vehicle. I rode along when something went wrong enough that procedure alone couldn't handle it. I was there to recognize patterns and tell people when to stop asking questions. That became my real job. The rules were still passed verbally, but they were fraying. Everyone remembered different versions. Some added precautions that helped. Others repeated older rules that no longer applied. That's how incomplete rules become lethal. Rule 6 emerged during this period, though no one numbered it at the time. If someone returns, do not ask them what they saw. That rule saved lives. It also ruined families. Returned individuals were isolated quickly. Medical holds. Psychological evaluation. Sometimes protective custody disguised as care. Loved ones were kept at arm's length, told it was for recovery. In reality, it was to limit witnesses. People noticed. Trust eroded. The thing exploited that erosion. In March of 2024, a volunteer firefighter named Ben Harlow disappeared during a routine check of a remote pump station. His wife, Claire, refused to wait for official response timelines. She went looking herself with 2 friends. They found Ben. He was standing in the creek below the station, water running around his boots, staring straight ahead. He didn't respond when they called his name. He didn't blink. Claire waded in without hesitation. That was violation number 1. Compassion. When she touched him, his skin felt cold but pliable, like something left out overnight that hadn't frozen solid. He turned his head slowly toward her. He smiled. That smile cost us 3 people. Only Claire came back. She was found 2 miles downstream at dawn, hypothermic and incoherent. She kept apologizing for letting him finish. Finish what? She never clarified. Ben and the 2 friends were never recovered. The creek ran clean. That incident forced another shift. We started mapping emotional relationships alongside geography. Family clusters. Social ties. Who would go looking if someone didn't come back? The thing didn't just remove individuals. It targeted lines of response. Containment meant discouraging love. That realization broke what little certainty I had left. I stopped pretending I was still the same person who'd taken the oath 14 years earlier. The badge had been about service. Now it felt like a liability, a marker that made me predictable. I started seeing Aaron less, talking to Noah only by phone. Distance became another rule. In May, Noah turned 13. I mailed him a card instead of visiting. That was my 3rd violation rooted in love, choosing absence to avoid a worse one. The thing noticed. On the night of his birthday, I was called out to an abandoned rest area along Highway 1. Reports of a child standing alone near the tree line, matching Noah's description closely enough that dispatch flagged it for me personally. I knew better. I went anyway. That's how duty kills you, not all at once, but by teaching you that you're indispensable. The boy was standing just beyond the edge of the lights. Hoodie, sneakers, hands in pockets. Same height Noah had been 6 months earlier. He didn't speak. I didn't say his name. I stayed in the car. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then the space around him shifted. Not visually, structurally. Like the world had misfiled something and was trying to correct it quietly. I felt pressure behind my eyes. My radio crackled once and died. The boy took a step forward. I locked the doors. That mattered. The thing cannot bypass deliberate refusal. Permission isn't just spoken. It's behavioral. The boy stopped. For a moment, just one, I saw the absence clearly. Not the shape it was wearing, but the gap behind it. A place where details failed to resolve. Where memory slid off. That was witnessing done correctly. The thing recoiled. The boy vanished. Not disappeared. Not erased. Unmade. I sat there until backup arrived. I didn't file a full report. I couldn't. The language didn't exist. After that, the thing changed tactics again. It stopped using familiar faces as often. Instead, it used responsibility. Calls came in about infrastructure failures, power substations, water treatment access points, fire lookout towers showing movement on inactive cameras. Always something that demanded response. Always something that pulled people into isolated spaces under the justification of duty. We lost a civil engineer that way. Then a lineman. Then 2 DOT workers on the same night. The county couldn't hide that volume. State resources were stretched thin everywhere else. Wildfires. Flooding. Budget cuts. We were deprioritized. That's how systemic failure completes itself, not with collapse, but with quiet abandonment. The state team dissolved without announcement. The man with the Forest Service patch stopped answering calls. The notebooks vanished from evidence lockers. It was just us again, only more tired. In August, I got a call from Aaron I hadn't expected. Noah was missing. He'd left school early. Walked out calmly. Told his teacher he needed air. Security footage showed him exiting the building and stopping at the edge of the parking lot. Then nothing. No footage after that. No witnesses. I drove to Missoula faster than I should have. They'd already started the search. Proper channels. Police. Volunteers. Too many witnesses too early. I knew what that meant. Erin was barely holding together. She asked me what to do. I had no rules left that wouldn't hurt her. I told her to stop searching. She slapped me. That was deserved. But she listened. We waited. For 12 hours. Nothing happened. Then Noah came home. He walked in through the front door like he'd been gone 10 minutes instead of half a day. Backpack still on. Shoes clean. He hugged Erin. Hard. He looked at me and smiled politely, like I was a guest. He didn't remember leaving. He didn't remember school. He said he'd been keeping it company. That was the phrase again. I insisted on isolation. Medical evaluation. Observation. Erin refused. That was her violation rooted in love. The house filled with tension. With watching. With too many witnesses sharing the same space. The thing doesn't like crowded rooms. On the third night, the power went out. When it came back, Noah was gone. This time, there was no rollback. No bleed. No noise. Just absence, clean and complete. Erin hasn't spoken to me since. I don't blame her. I don't know if Noah is gone, or if he's something else now. I know the difference matters less than it used to. After that, I stopped pretending containment was still possible in the old sense. The rules don't stop it. They slow it. They shape how much damage it does on the way through us. That's all they were ever meant to do. I'm still alive because I learned when not to look, when not to listen, when not to go. Most people don't get that luxury. And now, neither does the system. After Noah vanished the second time, the county stopped calling it a missing child case. That decision wasn't made in a meeting. It didn't need to be. The calls simply stopped escalating. Resources quietly redirected. The language softened. Ongoing family matter. Unconfirmed sighting. No evidence of foul play. Aaron left Missoula 3 weeks later. No forwarding address. She sent one message. 4 words. Don't look for us. I haven't. That restraint is the only reason I'm still functional enough to finish this. I resigned from the sheriff's office in November of 2024. Officially, it was early retirement due to accumulated stress and departmental restructuring. Unofficially, they were relieved to let someone with my pattern recognition step out of the system before I forced them to acknowledge what they could no longer control. They kept my notes. They didn't ask me to stop writing. That matters. Because systems don't end when people leave them. They persist. They decay. They get repurposed. I stayed in Granite County. That surprises people when they hear it. They assume distance equals safety. They assume leaving the environment breaks the connection. That's another incomplete rule. The thing isn't bound to geography. Geography is just where we first noticed it, where our rules accidentally intersected with its limitations. Elevation still matters. Witness density still matters. Deliberate refusal still matters. But none of those are guarantees. After I left the department, reports continued filtering to me through informal channels. Old colleagues. Dispatchers who trusted me. A county clerk who'd seen too many redacted death certificates. The pattern had shifted again. Fewer disappearances in the wilderness. More in transition spaces. Rest stops. Trailheads. School parking lots. Hospital corridors after visiting hours. Anywhere people pause between obligations. Anywhere rules momentarily loosen. The thing had learned that containment wasn't enforced uniformly. It never needed to overwhelm us, just outlast us. One case in particular forced me to accept what this had become. In February of 2025, a highway patrol officer named Michelle Grant vanished during a traffic stop just east of Drummond. Dash cam footage showed her exiting her cruiser, approaching a stopped vehicle, and pausing. Then the footage glitched. When it resumed, the road was empty. Both vehicles gone. No skid marks. No debris. No witnesses. What made this different was the rollback. Within hours, calls flooded in from 3 counties. Drivers reported seeing an abandoned cruiser parked in the middle of nowhere. Others claimed to hear a radio calling for help from their own dashboards. Michelle was found the next day standing inside her cruiser, parked neatly on the shoulder where it had originally stopped. Engine running. Lights off. She was alive. But she couldn't exit the vehicle. Not physically. Psychologically. Every time someone opened the door, she screamed that they were breaking the shape. That if she stepped out, it would notice the gap again. She's still there. Rotated crews bring her food. Medical staff monitor vitals through the window. No one tries to force her out anymore. Containment through accommodation. That's when I understood the final failure. We weren't containing the thing anymore. We were reorganizing around it. The rules had become infrastructure. And infrastructure always gets normalized. People ask why I'm recording this now. Because normalization is the most dangerous phase. When horror becomes routine, enforcement becomes optional. Compassion fills the gaps. Duty overrides caution. That's when violations multiply. I still hear from former deputies who try to enforce the old rules. They're tired. They're isolated. They're treated like relics from a different problem set. You can't keep telling people not to help, one of them said to me. That's not who we are. He disappeared 2 weeks later trying to assist a stranded motorist at elevation during a snowstorm. Compassion again. Always compassion. Here is what I know now, stripped of narrative and grief. The thing does not want to kill everyone. It wants to persist. It feeds on human systems because systems produce predictable behavior. Predictable behavior creates gaps. Gaps are where it acts. It does not always mimic people. It does not always speak. When it does, it is costly for it. Unstable. That's why it prefers absence. Absence is efficient. Its primary interaction is erasure. Its secondary damage is psychological collapse. Its limitation is witnesses. Not cameras. Not records. Human witnesses who notice absence without resolving it. That distinction is everything. Here are the rules as they exist now. Not officially. Not safely. But honestly. Rule 1. If someone disappears without struggle, do not try to reconstruct their last moments. Reconstruction creates continuity. Continuity invites rollback. Rule 2. Do not respond alone to calls in isolated areas, even if duty demands it. Especially if duty demands it. Rule 3. If you encounter someone who appears lost but cannot explain how they arrived, keep distance. Distance is refusal. Rule 4. Never call out to someone you cannot see clearly. Names are anchors. Rule 5. If you see someone you love where they should not be, you are not being tested. You are being used. Rule 6. If someone returns, do not ask them where they've been. Do not help them explain it to themselves. Rule 7, and this one will cost you the most. Sometimes the correct response is to let someone go. This rule is why people stop listening. This rule is why systems fail. I violated it more times than I can count. I lost my partner, that I lost my son, that I lost my marriage, that I lost my badge. What I didn't lose is awareness. That awareness is the only thing I have left to offer. If you're hearing this, or reading it, it's because the containment perimeter has already expanded past where I could pretend it was isolated. You don't need to be in Montana. You don't need mountains or snow. You just need a place where rules exist, people follow them out of habit, and compassion overrides caution when the system hesitates. That's everywhere. Listen carefully now, because this is the part no report will ever include. If you are standing somewhere quiet, and you suddenly realize something is missing, not an object, not a person you watched leave, but a space where something should be, do not fill that gap. Do not explain it away. Do not go looking. Notice it. Witness it. Then leave. Do not tell yourself you're being paranoid. That impulse is the thing working through you. Do not assume someone else will handle it. That assumption is how it spreads. And if one day, someone you love appears where they absolutely should not be, and every part of you is screaming to go to them, remember this. The rules were never meant to save everyone. They were meant to slow what comes next. I'm telling you too late because that's how confessions work. By the time you understand why the rules exist, something has already learned how you break them. And it is very patient.